What happens when a wealthy man's arrogance meets a humble driver's dignity, and modern technology reveals the shocking truth? This is an absolutely incredible story that will make you question everything you think you know about success, character, and the hidden stories of the people who serve us every single day. You're about to witness how one car ride completely changed two men's lives forever, and how a simple dashcam recording exposed truths that no one could have imagined. If you want to see this life-changing moment unfold and discover how respect can be earned in the most unexpected ways, make sure to smash that like button right now, subscribe to our channel, and hit that notification bell so you never miss these powerful stories that remind us never to judge someone by their current circumstances. I'm also incredibly curious to know where you're watching this amazing transformation from. Drop your city or country in the comments below. Trust me, by the end of this story, you'll never look at the people around you the same way again. The morning mist was still clinging to the towering glass facades of downtown Seattle when the first rays of autumn sunlight began to pierce through the perpetual cloud cover that shrouded the Pacific Northwest. On the 49th floor of the prestigious Columbia Center, the corner office of Nathaniel Sterling commanded a breathtaking view of Elliott Bay, Mount Rainier, and the sprawling urban landscape that stretched from Puget Sound to the Cascade Mountains. The office itself was a monument to wealth and power, featuring floor-to-ceiling windows, handcrafted furniture made from rare woods, and an art collection that included original works by Picasso, Monet, and Jackson Pollock. Nathaniel Sterling, at 53 years old, was the founder and CEO of Sterling Global Holdings, a diversified investment empire that controlled assets worth over $8 billion across multiple industries, including technology, real estate, renewable energy, and international finance. His personal net worth exceeded $2 billion, making him one of the wealthiest individuals on the West Coast and a fixture on Forbes' annual Billionaire rankings. His company's headquarters occupied 12 floors of the Columbia Center, and his influence extended far beyond Seattle to financial centers around the world. Born into privilege as the son of a successful banking family, Nathaniel had never experienced financial hardship or economic uncertainty. He had attended exclusive private schools, graduated from Harvard Business School, and inherited both substantial wealth and extensive business connections that had accelerated his rise to prominence in international finance. Over the past 30 years, he had built Sterling Global Holdings into a powerhouse that employed over 15,000 people worldwide and generated billions in revenue annually. But despite his extraordinary material success, Nathaniel Sterling was a deeply unhappy and increasingly isolated man. His marriage to socialite Catherine Winthrop had ended in a bitter divorce 3 years earlier, costing him nearly $400 million in settlements and revealing the emptiness of a relationship that had been built more on social convenience than genuine affection. His relationship with his 2 adult children was strained and formal, limited to awkward holiday dinners and brief business meetings when they needed financial support for various ventures. Nathaniel's pursuit of wealth and status had consumed virtually every aspect of his life, leaving him with few genuine friendships and no meaningful relationships outside of business transactions. He was surrounded by people who valued his money and connections rather than his character, and he had become increasingly cynical about human nature and suspicious of others' motives. His worldview had been shaped by decades of high-stakes negotiations, where trust was a liability and weakness was ruthlessly exploited. On this particular Thursday evening in late October, Nathaniel was preparing to leave his office for what promised to be one of the most important business dinners of his career. Sterling Global Holdings was on the verge of completing a merger with Yamamoto Industries, a Japanese conglomerate that controlled significant interests in robotics, artificial intelligence, and advanced manufacturing. The proposed deal was worth $12 billion and would create one of the largest technology investment firms in the world. The dinner meeting was being held at Canlis, Seattle's most exclusive and prestigious restaurant, where Nathaniel would be hosting Hiroshi Yamamoto, the elderly patriarch of Yamamoto Industries, along with a delegation of senior executives and advisors who would determine the fate of the merger. The stakes could not have been higher. Success would cement Nathaniel's position as one of the most powerful business leaders in the global technology sector, while failure would cost his company billions in lost opportunities and potentially trigger a decline that could destroy everything he had built. Nathaniel had originally planned to travel to the restaurant in his Bugatti Chiron, a $3 million hypercar that he enjoyed using to make dramatic impressions at important business events. The vehicle was one of only 500 ever manufactured, and its presence at high-profile gatherings always generated the kind of attention and status recognition that Nathaniel craved. However, the weather had turned unexpectedly severe during the afternoon, with heavy rain, strong winds, and early reports of flooding in low-lying areas of the city. His usual chauffeur, James Morrison, a professional driver who had worked for wealthy families for over 20 years, was unavailable due to a family emergency involving his hospitalized mother. The luxury car service that Nathaniel sometimes used for important events was completely booked due to the combination of severe weather and the Thursday evening demand from other business executives and social events throughout the city. Reluctantly, and for the first time in his adult life, Nathaniel had decided to use a rideshare app to get to the restaurant. The idea of riding in some stranger's personal vehicle was deeply distasteful to him. He was accustomed to traveling in luxury vehicles with professional drivers who understood their place in the social hierarchy and treated him with the deference and respect that his wealth and status commanded. Nathaniel's assistant, Margaret Chen, had installed the rideshare app on his iPhone earlier in the day and had walked him through the process of requesting a ride. The technology was simple enough, though Nathaniel found it annoying and beneath his dignity that he couldn't specify exactly what type of vehicle he wanted or provide detailed instructions about his expectations for service quality and professional behavior. At exactly 6:30 p.m., 30 minutes before his scheduled arrival at Canlis, Nathaniel's phone buzzed with a notification that his driver had arrived and was waiting in the circular driveway outside the Columbia Center. Looking through the floor-to-ceiling windows of his office, Nathaniel could see a dark blue Honda Accord with rideshare decals displayed in the front and rear windows, parked between a Tesla Model S and a Mercedes-Benz S-Class that belonged to other executives in the building. The sight of the modest, well-maintained, but clearly middle-class vehicle immediately irritated Nathaniel, who was accustomed to being transported in luxury sedans, SUVs, or sports cars that reflected his wealth and social status. The Honda Accord, while clean and in good condition, looked completely out of place among the high-end vehicles that typically frequented the Columbia Center's executive parking areas. Nathaniel gathered his briefcase, which contained the confidential merger documents and financial projections that would be crucial to the evening's negotiations, and took the executive elevator down to the building's marble-appointed lobby. He was dressed in a custom-tailored Tom Ford suit that had cost more than many people earned in several months, paired with Italian leather shoes and a Swiss watch that was worth more than most luxury cars. As Nathaniel walked through the revolving doors and into the October evening, the wind and rain immediately assaulted him, despite the covered walkway that led from the building entrance to the street. The driver of the Honda Accord had gotten out of the vehicle and was standing beside the passenger door with a large umbrella, clearly intending to help his passenger stay dry during the brief but exposed walk from the building to the car. "Mr. Sterling?" the driver asked politely, extending the umbrella to provide coverage as Nathaniel approached the vehicle through the wind and rain. "Yes," Nathaniel replied curtly, barely glancing at the man who was trying to protect him from the weather. He slid into the back seat without acknowledging the driver's courtesy or expressing any appreciation for the gesture, immediately pulling out his phone and beginning to scroll through emails related to the merger negotiations. The driver, whose name was Michael Chen, was a 38-year-old man who had been driving for rideshare companies for the past 2.5 years while pursuing a career transition that had proven far more difficult and time-consuming than he had originally anticipated. To Nathaniel, Michael was just another anonymous service provider, indistinguishable from the countless waiters, doormen, clerks, and maintenance workers who facilitated his daily life without warranting any particular attention, consideration, or respect. But Michael's story was far more complex, impressive, and heartbreaking than Nathaniel could have imagined or would have cared to learn. 15 years earlier, Dr. Michael Chen had been a rising star in the field of pediatric cardiac surgery at Seattle Children's Hospital, one of the most prestigious medical institutions in the Pacific Northwest. He had graduated summa cum laude from the University of Washington School of Medicine, completed his surgical residency at Boston Children's Hospital, and returned to Seattle to begin what everyone expected would be a distinguished career, saving the lives of children with complex heart conditions. Michael had specialized in the most challenging and high-risk pediatric cardiac procedures, operations that other surgeons considered too dangerous or technically demanding to attempt. Over the course of 12 years, he had performed thousands of operations on infants and children, developing innovative surgical techniques that had been published in medical journals and adopted by cardiac surgery programs around the world. His colleagues respected his technical skill and clinical judgment. His patients' families trusted him with their children's lives, and his research contributions had advanced the field of pediatric cardiac surgery significantly. Michael had been married to Dr. Sarah Williams, a pediatric oncologist he had met during their medical training, and they had twin daughters, Emma and Sophie, who were now 16 years old and excelling in their studies at a competitive private high school. The family had lived in a beautiful home in the affluent Magnolia neighborhood, had taken vacations to Europe and Asia, and had been active in Seattle's medical and philanthropic communities. But Michael's life had been completely destroyed 3 years earlier by a series of devastating events that had cost him everything he had worked to build. It had started when Sarah was diagnosed with stage 4 pancreatic cancer at the age of 41, a diagnosis that carried a survival rate of less than 5% and typically allowed patients only months to live. The cancer had been discovered during what was supposed to be a routine physical examination, but by the time it was detected, the disease had already metastasized throughout her body. Sarah had fought the cancer with the same determination and scientific rigor that she had brought to treating her young patients, undergoing experimental treatments, participating in clinical trials, and traveling to medical centers around the world in search of therapies that might extend her life or offer hope for a cure. Michael had taken extensive leave from his surgical practice to care for his wife and support their daughters through the crisis. But despite their best efforts and access to the finest medical care available, Sarah had died 18 months after her diagnosis. The loss of his wife had been devastating enough, but the financial consequences of her illness had been equally catastrophic for the family. Even with excellent health insurance, the costs of experimental treatments, out-of-network specialists, travel to medical centers, and lost income from both parents taking time off work had depleted their savings and forced them to mortgage their home to pay for medical expenses. The emotional trauma of watching his wife die slowly and painfully had also taken a severe toll on Michael's ability to perform the demanding work of pediatric cardiac surgery. The precision, focus, and emotional control required for operations on critically ill children became increasingly difficult as he struggled with grief, depression, and the overwhelming responsibility of raising his daughters as a single parent. The final blow had come when Michael made a critical error during a complex heart surgery on a 6-month-old infant. Exhausted from weeks of sleepless nights caring for his daughters and distracted by ongoing grief over his wife's death, he had made a mistake in judgment that resulted in complications that proved fatal for the child. Although a medical review board had determined that the error was understandable given Michael's personal circumstances and that he was not criminally liable, he had been devastated by the knowledge that his personal problems had contributed to the death of a child whose life he had been trusted to save. Michael had voluntarily surrendered his medical license and resigned from his position at Seattle Children's Hospital, unable to continue practicing medicine, while his judgment remained compromised by grief and emotional instability. The decision had been professionally and financially devastating. His surgeon's salary of over $400,000 per year had been replaced by unemployment benefits and whatever income he could generate from driving for rideshare companies. For the past 2.5 years, Michael had been working 12 to 16 hours a day, 7 days a week, driving for multiple rideshare and delivery companies while trying to support his daughters and pay off the massive debts that had accumulated during his wife's illness. His twins were both academically gifted and had aspirations of attending prestigious universities, but the family's financial situation had made it increasingly difficult to afford the private school tuition, test preparation, college counseling, and other expenses that would give them the best opportunities for their futures. Michael had been attempting to rebuild his life and career, but the process had proven far more challenging than he had anticipated. Returning to medicine would require extensive retraining, psychological evaluation, and a lengthy process of rebuilding professional credibility that could take years and cost hundreds of thousands of dollars in lost income and educational expenses. Alternative careers that could utilize his scientific background and analytical skills typically required additional education or certifications that he couldn't afford while supporting his family. None of this personal history was visible to Nathaniel as he settled into the back seat of Michael's Honda Accord and immediately immersed himself in business communications on his smartphone. To Nathaniel, Michael was just another anonymous service provider whose personal story was completely irrelevant to the transportation transaction at hand. "Where are we heading this evening, sir?" Michael asked politely, adjusting his rearview mirror and preparing to enter the destination into his GPS navigation system. "Canlis Restaurant," Nathaniel replied without looking up from his phone screen. "And I'm already running behind schedule, so I need you to get there as quickly as possible despite this weather." "Certainly, sir. I'll take the most efficient route available, and I'll do my best to get you there on time while ensuring our safety in these road conditions." Michael pulled away from the Columbia Center and began navigating through downtown Seattle's evening traffic, which was moving more slowly than usual due to the combination of heavy rain, reduced visibility, and accidents that always seemed to multiply during severe weather conditions. The streets were slick with standing water, and other drivers were proceeding cautiously as they tried to avoid the flooding that was beginning to affect low-lying areas throughout the city. As they drove through the evening darkness, Nathaniel continued working on his phone, occasionally taking calls from business associates and speaking in the kind of loud, self-important tone that people use when they want everyone around them to understand how busy and important they are. "Tell the Japanese delegation that all the regulatory approvals are in place," Nathaniel said during one call, his voice carrying easily throughout the small interior of the Honda. "We're looking at a deal that will create unprecedented market opportunities and generate billions in revenue over the next decade. This merger is going to transform both companies and establish us as the dominant force in Asian technology markets." Michael listened politely, while focusing primarily on navigating safely through the increasingly dangerous driving conditions. During his years of driving rideshare, He had learned that passengers often treated his vehicle like a private office, conducting confidential business calls and personal conversations without considering that their driver was present and could hear everything they discussed. About 15 minutes into the trip, they encountered a massive traffic jam caused by a multi-vehicle accident that had blocked 3 lanes of Interstate 5, the main north-south freeway that connected downtown Seattle to the restaurant districts and residential neighborhoods where Canlis was located. Cars were backed up for miles, moving only a few feet at a time when they moved at all, and Michael could see that the backup extended far beyond what was visible from their current position. "What's happening up there?" Nathaniel demanded, looking up from his phone for the first time since getting into the car. "Why aren't we moving at normal speed?" "There appears to be a serious accident ahead of us, sir," Michael explained calmly, while scanning traffic conditions and looking for alternative routes. "Traffic is backing up significantly, but I'm going to try to find an alternate route that might allow us to avoid the worst of this congestion." "Well, figure it out quickly," Nathaniel snapped, his tone revealing both impatience and a complete lack of understanding about the realities of urban traffic management. "I don't have time to sit in traffic jams. I'm already late for one of the most important business meetings of my career." Michael began maneuvering onto surface streets, using his knowledge of Seattle's complex road system and real-time traffic data from his navigation app to find routes that might allow them to bypass the freeway congestion. However, the rain was making driving conditions treacherous on all roads, and he was forced to proceed more slowly than normal to ensure their safety and avoid accidents. "Can't you drive any faster than this?" Nathaniel complained, after they had been traveling on surface streets for several minutes. "I've got a room full of Japanese executives waiting for me at this restaurant, and every minute we're delayed is potentially costing my company millions of dollars in lost opportunities." "I understand your urgency completely, sir," Michael replied professionally, maintaining his composure despite the unreasonable demands. "But the road conditions are quite dangerous right now with all this rain and flooding. I want to make sure we get you to your destination safely." Nathaniel's response revealed the true depth of his arrogance and his contemptuous attitude toward anyone he considered to be beneath his social and economic status. "Look, I don't care about road conditions or safety concerns. I care about getting to my meeting on time. If you can't handle driving in a little rain, maybe you should consider finding a different line of work." The comment was both insulting and revealing, demonstrating Nathaniel's complete inability to understand or empathize with the challenges faced by people who worked in service industries. Michael felt the sting of the insult, but had developed thick skin during his years of dealing with difficult passengers, and he understood that responding to provocations would only escalate the situation and potentially result in poor ratings that could affect his income. "I understand your frustration, sir," Michael said quietly, maintaining his professional demeanor despite the personal attack. "I'm doing everything possible to balance speed with safety." But Nathaniel was just getting started with his verbal assault. The combination of stress about the crucial business dinner, his general impatience with what he perceived as inferior service, and his deeply ingrained sense of superiority over working-class people was bringing out the worst aspects of his personality and character. "Your everything isn't good enough," Nathaniel said harshly, his voice dripping with condescension and contempt. "I pay premium rates for premium service, and what I'm getting is some amateur driver in a middle-class economy car who's apparently too incompetent or cowardly to navigate basic weather conditions." Michael felt his hands tighten slightly on the steering wheel, but he continued to maintain his professional composure and focus on driving safely through the storm. He had encountered rude and demanding passengers before, though few had been quite as personally insulting and deliberately cruel as Nathaniel was proving to be. As they continued through the darkened streets of Seattle, with rain pounding against the windshield and wind buffeting the car, Nathaniel's behavior became increasingly obnoxious and demeaning. He took several more business calls during which he spoke loudly about deals worth hundreds of millions of dollars, clearly trying to impress or intimidate his driver with displays of his wealth and importance. "I'm about to close a $12 billion merger tonight," Nathaniel announced during one call, speaking loudly enough to ensure that Michael could hear every word. "The kind of money we're discussing is more than most people see in 100 lifetimes. This deal will establish my company as one of the most powerful forces in global technology markets." When they encountered another stretch of slow-moving traffic caused by flooding in an underpass, Nathaniel's patience finally exploded completely. "This is absolutely ridiculous," he said with barely controlled rage. "I should have known better than to trust my transportation to some random driver who probably barely finished high school and has no understanding of what it means to provide professional service to important clients." The phrase, "probably barely finished high school," was particularly stinging because it revealed the depth of Nathaniel's prejudices and assumptions about people who worked in service industries. He was making judgments about Michael's intelligence, education, and capabilities based solely on his current job, without any knowledge of his background, circumstances, or qualifications. "Sir," Michael said quietly, his voice still professional despite the mounting verbal abuse, "I understand that you're under pressure to get to your meeting on time. I'm doing everything I can to get you there safely and as quickly as possible, given the current road conditions." "Your everything is pathetic and insufficient," Nathaniel shot back with vicious intensity. "I don't know what your story is. Probably some dropout who couldn't succeed in the real world and ended up driving other people around for a living because that's all you're capable of doing. But I'm paying for a service, and I expect to receive value for my money, not excuses about weather and traffic." Michael felt something break inside him at that moment. For 2.5 years, he had endured countless insults and dismissive comments from passengers who assumed that driving rideshare was a dead-end job for people with limited intelligence and no ambition. But Nathaniel's contemptuous assessment of his character and capabilities was more personally cruel and devastating than anything he had experienced during his years of providing transportation services. The irony was almost overwhelming. He was being insulted and demeaned by a passenger who had no idea that the man driving him had spent 15 years saving children's lives, had contributed to medical research that had improved cardiac surgery outcomes worldwide, and had given up a prestigious career to care for his dying wife and support his children through an unimaginable tragedy. "Actually, sir," Michael said, his voice still controlled but carrying a slight edge for the first time during the trip, "you might be surprised by some people's backgrounds and circumstances. Not everyone driving rideshare is here because they couldn't succeed in other fields." Nathaniel laughed with genuine cruelty and dismissiveness. "Right. I'm sure you've got some pathetic sob story about how you're really a misunderstood genius who just hasn't gotten your big break yet. Everyone thinks they're special and unique, but most people are exactly what they appear to be. Mediocre individuals doing mediocre work because that's the absolute limit of their capabilities and ambition." The statement was breathtakingly cruel and revealed the depth of Nathaniel's contempt for anyone who didn't possess his level of wealth and social status. Michael didn't respond to the insult, having learned over the years that trying to defend himself or correct passengers' assumptions usually just led to more arguments and potentially poor ratings that could affect his ability to earn income. They were about 10 minutes away from Canlis when they encountered the incident that would change both of their lives forever and expose the profound ignorance of Nathaniel's assumptions about his driver's background and capabilities. As they approached a busy intersection in the Queen Anne neighborhood, Michael noticed a commotion on the sidewalk ahead, where a crowd was gathering around someone who appeared to have collapsed. Michael slowed the Honda Accord and pulled over to get a better view of what was happening. A young woman, who appeared to be in her early 20s, was lying unconscious on the wet sidewalk, while several people stood around her looking panicked and uncertain about what to do. Someone was shouting for help, and Michael could see that the situation was potentially life-threatening. "What are you stopping for?" Nathaniel demanded angrily from the back seat. "We don't have time for whatever drama is happening on the sidewalk. Keep driving and get me to my restaurant." But Michael was already putting the car in park and reaching for his door handle, his medical training taking over as he assessed the emergency situation unfolding in front of them. He could see that the young woman was in severe distress and needed immediate medical attention. "Sir, someone appears to need emergency medical assistance," Michael explained as he prepared to leave the vehicle. "I need to check on their condition." "Are you completely insane?" Nathaniel exploded with fury. "I don't care if someone tripped and fell or fainted or whatever minor inconvenience is happening out there. You're being paid to drive me to my destination, not to play Good Samaritan to random strangers on the street." But Michael was already out of the car, running through the rain toward the crowd of people surrounding the collapsed young woman. Nathaniel sat in the back seat, absolutely furious at what he perceived as an inexcusable abandonment of professional responsibilities and a complete disregard for his urgent need to get to the restaurant on time. What happened next was captured in perfect high-definition detail by Michael's dashcam, a sophisticated camera system mounted on his dashboard that recorded everything that occurred both inside and outside the vehicle. Michael had installed the multi-angle camera setup several months earlier for legal protection and insurance purposes, but he had never imagined that it would document anything as dramatic and life-changing as what was about to unfold. The young woman on the sidewalk was Jessica Martinez, a 23-year-old graduate student at the University of Washington who had been walking to meet friends for dinner when she had suffered a severe allergic reaction to something she had eaten earlier in the day. By the time Michael reached her, Jessica was unconscious, struggling to breathe and showing signs of anaphylactic shock that could be fatal without immediate medical intervention. Without any hesitation, Michael dropped to his knees on the wet pavement beside Jessica and began performing emergency medical procedures with the kind of precision and confidence that could only come from years of advanced medical training and experience. His movements were swift and sure as he assessed her vital signs, checked her airway, and recognized the symptoms of severe anaphylaxis. "Has anyone called 911? Michael shouted to the crowd while beginning emergency treatment procedures. "Yes, but they said the ambulance might be delayed because of the weather and all the accidents tonight," someone replied anxiously. "Does anyone have an EpiPen or epinephrine auto-injector?" Michael asked urgently while continuing to monitor Jessica's condition. "I think she has one in her purse," a young man said, frantically searching through Jessica's belongings. Michael quickly located the EpiPen and administered the emergency injection of epinephrine with the practiced skill of someone who had performed similar procedures countless times. He then positioned Jessica to maintain her airway, monitored her vital signs, and provided reassurance to the crowd of worried bystanders who were amazed to see a rideshare driver demonstrating such advanced medical expertise. "Is she going to be okay?" asked a woman who identified herself as Jessica's friend. "The epinephrine should help stabilize her condition," Michael explained, while continuing to monitor Jessica's breathing and pulse. "But she needs to get to a hospital as quickly as possible for additional treatment and observation." As they waited for the paramedics to arrive, Michael continued providing emergency care with the kind of professional competence that immediately impressed everyone present. He explained Jessica's condition to her friends, provided instructions about what to expect during her hospital treatment, and coordinated with the crowd to ensure that traffic was directed around the emergency scene. When the paramedics finally arrived, about 8 minutes later, one of them immediately recognized Michael from his years working at Seattle Children's Hospital. "Dr. Chen, I didn't know you were in the area. Thank you for taking care of this patient." "Knife!" The paramedic's comment, referring to Michael as Dr. Chen, was captured clearly by the dashcam, along with everything else that had transpired during the life-saving medical intervention. The sophisticated audio recording system picked up every word of the conversation, including the paramedics' obvious respect for Michael's medical expertise and their familiarity with his professional reputation. Nathaniel, who had been sitting in the car growing increasingly angry about the delay to his important dinner meeting, heard the paramedic's comment through the open car door and felt as if he had been struck by lightning. The rideshare driver he had been insulting and demeaning for the entire trip was apparently a doctor, and not just any doctor, but one who was clearly well known and respected by emergency medical personnel. Michael returned to the car about 20 minutes later, his suit jacket soaked from the rain and his hands still slightly trembling from the adrenaline of the emergency medical situation. He slid back into the driver's seat and reached for his seatbelt without saying anything about what had just happened, preparing to continue the trip to the restaurant as if saving someone's life was a routine part of his evening. Nathaniel sat in stunned silence, trying to process what he had witnessed and heard. The man he had been calling mediocre and unsuccessful had just performed medical procedures that had literally saved someone's life. The dropout he had been dismissing as incapable of providing professional service had demonstrated skills, knowledge, and expertise that Nathaniel could never hope to possess. Are you actually a doctor?" Nathaniel asked quietly, his previous arrogance completely replaced by confusion, embarrassment, and a dawning realization of how wrong his assumptions had been. Michael glanced at him in the rearview mirror, his expression showing the exhaustion of someone who had just dealt with a life-threatening emergency while enduring hours of verbal abuse. "I was. Not anymore." "What do you mean, not anymore? What happened?" For the first time since the trip had begun, Michael's professional composure cracked slightly. The emotional toll of the emergency situation, combined with hours of enduring Nathaniel's insults and contempt, had left him feeling raw and vulnerable. The question touched on the most painful period of his life, and he found himself responding with uncharacteristic honesty. "I gave up my medical license 2.5 years ago," Michael said quietly, his voice carrying the weight of enormous personal loss. "My wife died of pancreatic cancer, and I couldn't continue practicing surgery while dealing with grief and trying to raise my twin daughters as a single parent. I made a mistake during an operation that cost a child their life, and I couldn't live with the possibility of that happening again." The stark honesty and devastating sadness of the statement hit Nathaniel like a physical blow to his chest. He was beginning to understand that everything he had assumed about Michael was not just wrong, but cruelly and ignorantly wrong. The man he had been attacking and demeaning was someone who had dedicated his life to saving others, who had given up everything to care for his dying wife, and who was now working a demanding job to support his children and rebuild his life after an unimaginable tragedy. "So you were a surgeon?" Nathaniel asked, his voice barely above a whisper, as he tried to comprehend the magnitude of his misjudgment. "Pediatric cardiac surgery. 15 years at Seattle Children's Hospital. But that's all in the past now." Nathaniel felt physically sick as he replayed every insult he had hurled, every assumption he had made, every cruel comment he had directed at Michael during the trip. He had been attacking a man who had spent his career saving children's lives, who had sacrificed his own financial security to care for his family during a crisis, and who was now working multiple jobs to support his daughter's education and his family's recovery from devastating medical expenses. The remaining few minutes of the trip to Canlis passed in complete and uncomfortable silence. Nathaniel was too ashamed and horrified by his own behavior to speak, while Michael was emotionally exhausted from the combination of the medical emergency and the verbal abuse he had endured throughout the evening. The revelation of his background had not been intended to shame his passenger, but rather had emerged from his emotional exhaustion and the stress of the situation. When they finally arrived at Canlis, Michael pulled up to the restaurant's elegant valet station and turned off the engine. The rain had begun to subside slightly, and the restaurant's warm lights created an inviting glow that contrasted sharply with the emotional turmoil inside the Honda Accord. "Thank you for the ride, Dr. Chen," Nathaniel said quietly as he reached for the door handle, using Michael's former title deliberately as a small gesture of respect and acknowledgement. "You're welcome, sir. I hope you have a successful evening." Nathaniel stepped out of the car, but then turned back, leaning down to speak through the open window with an expression of genuine remorse and shame. "Dr. Chen, I owe you an enormous and heartfelt apology. Everything I said tonight was completely inappropriate, inexcusable, and based on ignorant assumptions. I had no right to speak to you that way, regardless of what I thought I knew about your situation or background." Michael looked at him with tired eyes that reflected years of struggling with loss, financial hardship, and the daily challenges of rebuilding a life that had been completely destroyed by circumstances beyond his control. "It's okay, Mr. Sterling. I'm used to it by now." "It's not okay, and you shouldn't have to be used to treatment like that from anyone. Ever." Nathaniel walked into Canlis, but he was no longer thinking about his $12 billion merger or his important dinner with Japanese executives. He was thinking about Michael Chen and about his own behavior and about the assumptions he made every day about the people who served him in various capacities. The revelation of Michael's background had shattered his worldview and forced him to confront uncomfortable truths about his character and values. The dinner meeting was a complete disaster from Nathaniel's perspective. He was distracted and unable to focus on the complex negotiations that were taking place around him. While Hiroshi Yamamoto and the other Japanese executives discussed the merger terms and strategic implications, Nathaniel kept thinking about the rideshare driver who had saved someone's life while being insulted and demeaned by a passenger who knew nothing about his background, character, or capabilities. Nathaniel's distraction was so obvious that Hiroshi Yamamoto eventually asked if there was a problem that was preventing him from participating fully in the discussions. Nathaniel was forced to make excuses about feeling unwell, which led to an early end to the dinner and a postponement of the merger negotiations that cost his company valuable time and momentum in the deal. The next morning, Nathaniel found himself unable to concentrate on work or think about anything other than the events of the previous evening. He had always prided himself on being a successful businessman who could read people quickly and accurately, who understood situations and relationships with sophisticated insight. But his encounter with Michael Chen had completely shattered his confidence in his own judgment and forced him to confront the possibility that his assumptions about people were fundamentally flawed and based on prejudice rather than actual understanding. Nathaniel spent most of Friday morning having his legal team and private investigators obtain copies of the dashcam footage from the rideshare company, using his influence and resources to access the recording that had captured the entire incident. When he watched the video in the privacy of his office, he was horrified and ashamed by his own behavior, while simultaneously amazed by Michael's professionalism, medical expertise, and grace under pressure. The footage showed clearly how Michael had maintained his composure and professional demeanor, despite constant verbal abuse and personal attacks. It documented his immediate recognition of a medical emergency and his expert response to a life-threatening situation. Most importantly, it captured the respect and recognition that the paramedics had shown for Michael's medical expertise, confirming that he was indeed a highly skilled physician who was well known in Seattle's medical community. Nathaniel spent the weekend researching Michael's background extensively, using private investigators and public records to learn more about the man he had so cruelly misjudged. What he discovered made him feel even worse about his behavior, and even more impressed by Michael's character and resilience. Dr. Michael Chen had indeed been one of the most respected pediatric cardiac surgeons in the Pacific Northwest. His colleagues described him as brilliant, compassionate, and absolutely dedicated to saving the lives of children with complex heart conditions. His research contributions had been significant, and his clinical skills had been regarded as exceptional even among the elite community of pediatric cardiac surgeons. The story of his wife's illness and death was heartbreaking in its details. Sarah Chen had been a beloved pediatric oncologist who had dedicated her life to treating children with cancer. Her own battle with pancreatic cancer had been fought with courage and determination, but the disease had ultimately proven too aggressive for even the most advanced treatments available. The financial impact of Sarah's illness on the family had been devastating. Despite having excellent health insurance, the costs of experimental treatments, travel to specialized medical centers, and lost income from both parents taking time off work had depleted their savings and forced them to take out loans against their home to pay for medical expenses. Michael's decision to leave medicine had been devastating to Seattle Children's Hospital, where he had been regarded as irreplaceable. His colleagues had understood his decision and had supported him during his time of grief, but they had also hoped that he would eventually return to practice once he had recovered emotionally from his losses. Nathaniel also learned about Michael's twin daughters, Emma and Sophie, who were both academically gifted students at a competitive private high school. Despite their families' financial struggles, both girls had maintained excellent grades and were involved in extracurricular activities that demonstrated their intelligence and ambition. Emma was interested in following her parents into medicine, while Sophie was passionate about biomedical engineering and wanted to develop medical devices that could help children with complex health conditions. By Monday morning, Nathaniel had made a decision that would change both of their lives in ways that neither of them could have anticipated. He called the rideshare company and requested Michael's contact information, which they provided after Nathaniel explained that he wanted to thank the driver for assistance during a medical emergency that had occurred during their trip. "Dr. Chen," Nathaniel said when Michael answered his phone later that morning, "this is Nathaniel Sterling. We met Thursday night when you drove me to dinner." Michael was surprised to hear from his former passenger, especially since the trip had ended on such an uncomfortable note with the revelation of his medical background. "Yes, Mr. Sterling. How can I help you? I'd like to meet with you in person if you're willing. I have something very important that I need to discuss with you, and I'd prefer to do it face-to-face rather than over the phone." Nitid. They agreed to meet at a coffee shop near Michael's home in the Ballard neighborhood, a modest establishment that was very different from the high-end restaurants and private clubs where Nathaniel usually conducted his business meetings. Michael was curious about what Nathaniel wanted to discuss, but he assumed it was probably related to the incident on Thursday night, or perhaps a complaint about some aspect of the rideshare experience. When Michael arrived at the coffee shop, Nathaniel was already waiting at a corner table with 2 cups of coffee and a thick manila folder containing documents that would transform Michael's life. Nathaniel stood up as Michael approached, extending his hand in a gesture of respect that was very different from his behavior during their previous encounter. "Dr. Chen," Nathaniel began, "I want to start by apologizing again for my inexcusable behavior Thursday night. There is no justification for the way I treated you, and I'm deeply ashamed of the things I said. But more than that, I want to make you an offer that I hope you'll consider very seriously." Michael sat down across from Nathaniel, confused by the formal tone and the unexpected nature of this meeting. "Mr. Sterling, you really didn't need to arrange a meeting just to apologize. I appreciate the gesture, but I understand that you were under pressure and dealing with a stressful situation." Actually, Dr. Chen, this meeting is about much more than an apology. I've spent the weekend learning about your background, your medical career, your family situation, and your current circumstances. I want to offer you a position that would allow you to use your skills and expertise again, while providing the financial security and professional fulfillment that you and your family deserve. Nathaniel opened the manila folder and pulled out several documents, including a detailed job description and a contract that represented an opportunity Michael had never dared to hope for. I'm proposing to create a new division within Sterling Global Holdings, focused on healthcare technology investments and medical facility development. You would serve as the Chief Medical Officer and Director of Healthcare Innovation, overseeing our investments in medical technology companies, advising on the development of healthcare facilities, and ensuring that our health-related investments meet the highest standards for patient care and clinical effectiveness. Michael stared at the documents in disbelief as Nathaniel continued explaining the proposal. The position would come with a salary of $600,000 per year, plus comprehensive health insurance that would cover any ongoing medical expenses for your family, a signing bonus of $200,000 to help address your current financial obligations, and equity participation in our healthcare investments that could be worth millions over time. The offer was so far beyond anything Michael had imagined possible that he initially wondered if he was being deceived or if there was some hidden catch that would make the opportunity less appealing than it appeared. "Mr. Sterling, this is incredibly generous, but I have to ask, why are you doing this? What happened Thursday night was just me doing what anyone with medical training would do in an emergency situation." Nathaniel leaned forward across the table, his expression serious and sincere, as he tried to explain the profound impact that Thursday night had had on his understanding of success, character, and what really mattered in life. "Dr. Chen, Thursday night, you showed me something about dedication and service that I had forgotten existed in the world. While I was sitting in that car complaining about being late to a dinner party, you were saving someone's life. While I was insulting you based on ignorant assumptions and prejudices, you were demonstrating the kind of expertise and commitment that most people can only aspire to possess." Nathaniel paused, gathering his thoughts before continuing with obvious emotion in his voice. "I've spent my entire career focused on making money and accumulating wealth and power. But watching you perform emergency medical procedures on that sidewalk made me realize that I've never done anything as important or meaningful as what you did in those few minutes. I want to give you an opportunity to return to work that utilizes your skills to help people, while also ensuring that you and your family have the financial security and support that you deserve after everything you've been through." Michael was quiet for a long moment, reading through the contract and trying to process the unexpected direction his life was taking. The salary alone was more than he had been making as a surgeon, and the benefits package would eliminate the financial pressures that had been crushing his family for years. "The offer is extraordinarily generous, Mr. Sterling, and the opportunity to work in healthcare again is more appealing than I can express. But I need to ask, is this motivated by guilt about Thursday night? Because if it is, I don't want charity, no matter how well-intentioned." "It's not charity, Dr. Chen. It's recognition of your value and capabilities. I need someone with your medical background and clinical expertise to help my company make intelligent investments in healthcare technologies and medical facilities. The healthcare industry is becoming increasingly important to our investment portfolio, and I need someone who understands both the medical and business aspects of these opportunities." Nathaniel pulled out additional documents that outlined Sterling Global's current healthcare investments and their strategic plans for expanding into medical technology ventures. "We're already invested in companies developing artificial organs, robotic surgical systems, and advanced diagnostic technologies. But I need someone with your clinical experience to help evaluate these investments and ensure that we're supporting technologies that will actually improve patient outcomes rather than just generate profits. Michael looked at the investment portfolio and was impressed by the range and sophistication of the companies that Sterling Global was supporting. The opportunity to influence the development of medical technologies that could help thousands of patients was exactly the kind of meaningful work that he had hoped to return to someday. "There's one more aspect of the position that I think you'll find appealing," Nathaniel continued. "The role would allow you to maintain a flexible schedule that accommodates your responsibilities as a single parent. We can arrange for home office days, flexible hours, and whatever accommodations you need to balance your professional duties with your family obligations. Mr. Sterling, if this offer is genuine, it would transform my family's life completely. But I need to understand what made you decide to create this position and offer it to me. This level of generosity towards someone you met once under difficult circumstances is extraordinary." Nathaniel was quiet for a moment, reflecting on the changes in his own perspective that had led to this moment and trying to articulate the profound impact that Thursday night had had on his understanding of success and meaning. "Dr. Chen, I've been successful in business by being ruthless, competitive, and focused entirely on my own financial interests. That approach has made me extremely wealthy, but it's also made me someone I'm not proud of being. Thursday night, watching you save that young woman's life while I sat in the car, thinking only about my own convenience and business concerns, I realized that I've spent my entire career accumulating money and power without ever contributing anything meaningful to the world." Nathaniel gestured toward the contract and supporting documents spread across the table between them. "This offer represents my attempt to do something worthwhile with the resources I've accumulated over the years. But more than that, it's my recognition that people like you, people with real skills, genuine dedication, and strong character, deserve to be supported and valued, not dismissed and insulted based on ignorant assumptions about their current circumstances." Michael signed the contract that afternoon, and within 3 weeks he had started his new position as Chief Medical Officer and Director of Healthcare Innovation for Sterling Global Holdings. The change in his family's circumstances was immediate and transformative. The signing bonus allowed him to pay off the debts that had accumulated during his wife's illness, while the salary and benefits package provided financial security that the family hadn't experienced since before Sarah's diagnosis. But perhaps more importantly, Michael found renewed purpose and meaning in his work. He was able to use his medical expertise to evaluate healthcare technology investments, advise on the development of medical facilities, and influence the direction of companies that were developing technologies to improve patient care. His clinical experience proved invaluable in identifying promising innovations and avoiding investments in technologies that looked impressive but wouldn't actually benefit patients. Emma and Sophie were able to continue at their private high school without financial pressure, and both girls began exploring opportunities at prestigious universities that had previously seemed financially impossible. Emma's interest in medicine was encouraged by her father's return to healthcare work, while Sophie's passion for biomedical engineering was supported by exposure to the cutting-edge companies in Sterling Global's investment portfolio. Nathaniel, meanwhile, discovered that meaningful work was far more satisfying than simply accumulating wealth for its own sake. The healthcare division that Michael led became one of the most successful and respected parts of Sterling Global Holdings, developing medical facilities and supporting technologies that improved patient outcomes while generating strong returns for investors. But the changes in Nathaniel's life went far beyond business success. His encounter with Michael had forced him to confront his own prejudices and assumptions about people based on their current circumstances rather than their character and capabilities. He began treating service workers, employees, and business associates with greater respect and consideration, recognizing that everyone had stories and struggles that weren't visible on the surface. 6 months after their initial meeting, Nathaniel and Michael had developed a genuine friendship based on mutual respect and shared commitment to using their resources and skills to benefit others. Nathaniel had also begun volunteering with organizations that supported families dealing with serious illnesses, contributing both his time and financial resources to programs that helped people navigate medical crises without facing financial ruin. The dashcam footage from that rainy Thursday night had been shared widely with Nathaniel's permission, becoming a viral video that sparked important conversations about assumptions, prejudice, and the hidden stories of people in service industries. The video was viewed by millions of people around the world and inspired countless discussions about treating others with dignity and respect, regardless of their current job or circumstances. Michael's story also inspired changes in how rideshare companies and other service industries supported their workers. Several companies implemented programs to help drivers and other service workers transition to careers that better utilize their skills and education, recognizing that many people in these positions were overqualified individuals dealing with temporary circumstances or personal challenges. Jessica Martinez, the young woman Michael had saved that night, made a full recovery from her allergic reaction and became a close friend of both Michael and his daughters. She often spoke publicly about how a chance encounter with a rideshare driver had saved her life, emphasizing that extraordinary people could be found in the most ordinary circumstances if we took the time to see beyond surface appearances. 2 years later, at the grand opening of Seattle's most advanced pediatric cardiac center, a facility that Michael had helped design and Nathaniel had funded, both men reflected on how much their lives had changed since that stormy October evening. "You know," Nathaniel said to Michael as they watched the first young patients being admitted to the state-of-the-art facility, "I spent 53 years thinking I understood what success and achievement meant. But it took a rideshare driver to teach me that real success isn't about what you accumulate for yourself. It's about what you contribute to others and how you treat the people around you." Michael smiled, watching as medical staff moved efficiently through the cardiac center that incorporated all of his recommendations for optimal patient care and family support. "And I spent 2.5 years thinking my medical career was permanently over. But it took an obnoxious passenger to help me realize that there are many different ways to use your skills to help people, even when the traditional path is no longer available." The cardiac center bore a dedication plaque near its main entrance that read, "Dedicated to the principle that extraordinary people can be found in ordinary circumstances, and that everyone deserves to be treated with dignity and respect, regardless of their current situation. Sometimes the most important opportunities to change lives are hiding in plain sight all around us." Nathaniel had also established the Sarah Chen Foundation for Medical Research, which funded research into pancreatic cancer treatment and provided support for families dealing with serious illnesses. The foundation had already contributed tens of millions of dollars to research efforts and had helped thousands of families access the care and resources they needed during medical crises. Michael's daughters, Emma and Sophie, both received full scholarships to prestigious universities, with Emma pursuing medicine at Harvard and Sophie studying biomedical engineering at MIT. Both young women were inspired by their father's resilience and determination, and they planned to dedicate their careers to helping others, just as their parents had done. The story of the millionaire who despised his rideshare driver until a dashcam revealed the truth became more than just a viral video. It became a powerful reminder about the danger of judging people based on their current circumstances rather than their character and capabilities. It inspired changes in corporate cultures, educational programs about respect and dignity in service industries, and countless individual decisions to treat others with greater kindness and consideration. If this incredible story of prejudice overcome, hidden talent recognized, and lives transformed through unexpected kindness moved you and changed how you think about the people who serve you every day, please show your support by hitting that like button and subscribing to our channel for more powerful stories that celebrate human dignity and the importance of looking beyond surface appearances. Share in the comments below about a time when you discovered that someone you had underestimated possessed extraordinary skills or character, or when someone showed you kindness that changed your perspective on life and success. Let's honor the Michael Chens of the world who continue to serve others with dignity and professionalism despite facing challenges and circumstances that would overwhelm most people. And let's remember that the person driving your car, serving your food, or cleaning your office might have a story that would amaze and inspire you if you took the time to see them as a complete human being deserving of respect and consideration. Sometimes the most important lessons about character, resilience, and what really matters in life come from the most unexpected sources, and the greatest opportunities to make a difference in someone's life are presented to us in the most ordinary moments if we have the wisdom to recognize them and the courage to act on them.